Wonderful. Okay, we'll move on to number 3, public comments, and our clerk Tracy will call you up.
Ed Klawowski.
Good evening. I'm Ed Klazowski. I've been a resident of the area for 35 years. 20-some years ago, I came in before a board that was the Township Board to talk about local roads. That was even before Sam Gallucci was superintendent. That's the last time the roads in our subdivision, Split Rail Farm, have been addressed. Also have a concern about Denker Road. I met earlier this week with Barbara and Mark about that road and have heard, got good news on that's being replaced. So probably a few years late, but it's a connector road that has a lot of traffic on it. In the last 25, 27 years, you know, life changes, and life within a subdivision changes. Today, within our subdivision, especially after COVID, we have a lot more walkers within the subdivision. Everybody has a dog. We have an older population, and people like to get exercise. If you look at the conditions of the roads, there's some parts of the roads that I really feel are unsafe to walk. You get tripping hazards, things of that nature. The other thing is the number of vehicles, as you know, that come into a subdivision these days. First, I'll comment just about LRS, the garbage trucks. During the summer, 3 come. They're about a third larger than they've been in previous years. They're huge trucks, very heavy, coming in the area. I don't know of another way to do it, but I'm just saying that impacts the roads. Postal Service, you know, they're coming 6 days a week. That's 1,800 times a year, a lot of traffic there. You have every day, UPS, Federal Express, who else is, DHL. Amazon is there all the time. People now work from home. They're getting, everything has changed with that. And we have a lot of professionals working from home. They get lunch delivered to the house. You can just see if you go to Costco at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the place is packed. People are working longer hours, but they have free time in between to go and drive around. So there's more use on the roads themselves. We don't have any sewerage system in most of our subdivisions throughout the village. So the water's running strictly down the street, not any sewers and any culverts. That breaks down the roads quicker than if you had a sewer system within the subdivision. I started my conversation at the 20-year mark with Sam Gallucci, and the refrain from him was, we do not have enough money to replace all the roads within a 20-year period. Don't have the funds to do that. Had the same conversation with many meetings with Mike Terrell. Mike drove me through the whole village. He showed me every subdivision that was worse than mine, okay? And he said we were very close in getting Denker done. I don't know if it was through his lead that we're this far with it, but immediately when Barbara was running for office, I called her 30 days before she got elected, talked to her about it, did a follow-up with her, had some discussions after that. Barbara told me the same refrain. We don't have the funds to replace roads in 20 years. My question, and a little understanding, there are very few revenue streams for the roads. Through the state, I guess through some grants, I was surprised that we don't even get sales tax from the gas station because we're not home rule. My question is to the board, are we being creative enough to look at other ways to bring money in to the village to get these roads done? you know, is there bonding we can go, I mean, not bond, yeah, through bonds to do that. I know they do that with the fire protection area, the fire district. Can we do something like that? I know many of you, well, I shouldn't say that, I don't know many of you, but I know you don't like additional taxes. I looked up the household income of the residents in Campton Hills. It's the highest in the area. It's almost $200,000 per household. Geneva's $137,000. St. Charles is about $110,000. Now they have other sources of revenue. The only area that I know they have worse streets than we do is the village of Wayne. And that's because they're private streets and they're paying for it directly themselves. You guys are all, experienced folks. I really challenge you to find better ways of funding this. And maybe it will cost the taxpayers some additional money. But I think it's reasonable to have roads repaired within a 20-year period of time. I think our property values are impacted by having roads that look the way they do. I avoid Danker Road. I don't like driving it. I go all the way around to Corn Road, to Silver Glen to get in my subdivision, because those roads have been done, and I know those are county roads, I believe, that have other county, state, they seem to have the funding. We don't have it. We're not that very old of a village, but I think we need to do a better job on roads, and that's why I came tonight.
Thank you, Ed.
So, any questions or? Yeah, they were done. So when I came in '97, I was 43 years old. Okay, I don't remember the name of the guy, but the superintendent of the highway department, he was a double amputee. That was about 65 years old. Maybe somebody recalls who that guy was. He came out. He surveyed it. Within a year, he had the streets and split rail subdivision redone, and when a couple years later, years after that, Danker was done, and they haven't been done since. Late 90s. Danker was probably maybe the early 2000s. I'm sure on the subdivision part of it. I'm not sure of the Danker, but it was close to it. It's the last time they were done.
All right, thank you, Ed.
Okay.
Brian Larson.
Well, I'm here just because a couple weeks ago I see my name in the paper again with Campton. Get kind of sick of it. Disappointed, not shocked. So I thought I'd just come in here and clear the air. The games, the lies will never stop in this village. I never met with Janet after she was elected, not once. I did meet with every single freaking candidate before election. I even sent emails to the existing board asking them to contact me to hear the true side of the story and get the facts right. They didn't even contact me back. You talk about not having money in the subdivision. They spent $250,000 over that on suing me, lost, and then had to pay me. This is disheartening. Muncie and McKelvey, you guys crack me up because these private sessions, you go back right after them and spill them all to this guy right here. Micromanaging the village still today, and I can prove it. So anybody who listens and watches this, I ask you to call me. I will give you the facts. I will prove to you how dirty these guys are. And Tyrell, you even coming in here is sickening.
Yeah.
There should be term limits at the least, but for everybody here watching and listening, this village just needs to be dissolved. It's dysfunctional. It's in the news more for bad than it is for good. And I think what I'll do is I'll take my money and I'll put it on a postcard, and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to send it to every resident in Campton Hills and explain to them the corruption here with Muncie and McKelvey and you and all the bullshit.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, that's it for our public comments, our speakers. We will move on to 4, the consent agenda. Anything to remove from the consent agenda?
What about item G?
Item G, thank you.
Well-
I was going to do that,
Oh,
but
okay,
it's okay. All right, any other items? Okay, take a motion to move the consent agenda
I so move.
As amended.
as amended. Yeah, we pulled 4G. Okay, moved by McKelvey,
Second.
second by Janet, and roll call.
Trustee McKelvey?
Aye.
Trustee Burson? Aye. Trustee Boatner?
Aye.
Trustee Muncy?
Aye.
Trustee Williams?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. We'll go on to staff reports, and we have A, Police Department, and that'll be Chief James Levand.
Thank you. I'll try to make it quick for you. So,
Okay.
we got a nice response from KDOT. As everyone's aware, they made Burlington and Silver Glen an all-way stop. So we assisted with that on January 30th for a couple hours. They did a really good job with it. So far, we've been out there the last couple weeks. Traffic has been good with it, even though it's something new. We've had a couple on Burlington that's disregarded it, especially a little bit later at night. But overall, it went well. They have a ton of signage out there warning it in advance, a lot of lights. So overall, everything went smooth. And as it's up for a little bit longer, I'm sure everyone will get used to it. So that went well. So we started the Officer of the Month, Officer of the Year program for 2025. It recognizes an officer for something that they did, or it could be more than one thing. So January, Stavi was Officer a Month. So at the next board meeting, I'd like to recognize her for her accomplishments during the month of January. Also, at an upcoming board meeting, I'd like to recognize Gateway, Vet, and Just for Paws here in town. So they've done a lot for CODA over the last 5 years. It's been all obviously donated. So at one of the upcoming board meetings, I'd like to recognize both of them because they've done a lot. So Officer Harvey and Kane County OEM hosted an emergency preparedness class last Thursday evening here. It had max participation, was 30, it was full. It was a great class, got good reviews on it. They're looking to do another one, and then one for juveniles coming up in the future. So once we get those, we'll post it. Police Department's working on a bunch of grants right now, some that are very promising, so hopefully it'll go good here. Christina's already put 3 of them out. I know grants are gonna be slightly discussed coming up here, so hopefully we'll get some good responses from that. And I think that, no, actually, I do want to bring up one point to the grant thing. Thanks to Scott Marquardt, because he brought it to my attention. ComEd has a grant every year, and it is $10,000 that goes to municipality. And one of the big things that they grant it for is speed trailers, which we've needed for a long time. So we filled that out. We think we got good odds on it, so it would at least be $10,000 towards the purchase of a speed trailer. So I do want to thank Scott for that because the deadline was coming quick. I would have missed it, so I know Hampshire recently got it, so hopefully we'll have good luck on that. And that's all I got, unless there's questions.
Chief, if you want to just address what Ray Weber and you and I talked about after the downpour Friday and the frozen ground and the number of complaints that you had and that resolved them with the highway department.
We got a lot, so obviously you get a couple inches of rain in the winter time, you're gonna get a lot of flooding. We know there's areas that get a lot of flooding here to begin with, but received like 6 complaints in an hour. Out of those complaints though, I think 4 of them were outside the village. It wasn't in our jurisdiction, it was the highway departments. So gave it to Ray, they responded to all of them, they dealt with them. Most of them they were able to deal with. A couple were a little more serious with land-wise and that, but it was a good response by the highway department and Ray. Right away, they dealt with it, but, I mean, flooding was a concern forever. Route 64 had flooding going across it, so it was just a large amount of rain, and the ground is frozen underneath it, so the water takes a while to go somewhere, so. But, yeah, we got a lot of calls for the flooding.
Chief, are you going to talk about the block party application at all, or no? It's just briefly.
I can. I didn't know if that was coming up too later, or
Well, it's under Police Department.
I will gladly do it. We've brought it up previously. I think we're all good with it. Thanks to Clerk Johnson, she helped get in a form. Attorney Forte reviewed it. There's no charge to it, so the village isn't charging anyone for it. This is something that should have been in place before. There's liabilities with it. Police and fire departments need to know if roads are gonna be closed. We need to have the ability to approve it, not having multiple roads closed. So now we have an easy form that will be fillable online. They can submit it to the chief of police. He'll review it. I think we average 15 to 20 block parties a year, and they go off with no problem. We have no issue in it, but at least we have some documentation. We have a coordinator that we can get a hold of if something does go wrong. So it's just something that we should have had before. Again, there is no charge to it. It's just a way to be able to sort of track any special events. If it's something, if you look at the forum, there are a few things. If someone decides they want to have an event in Campton Hills, let's say it's using roadways, I mean, it could be runs, it could be bicycles, there's obviously other special events. Those events would have to have a certificate of insurance, obviously indemnifying the village. So there is a few things to it, but other than that, the main purpose was the block party, and I think we accomplished that.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Tom.
Chief, when are you going to hear back from that grant on the light tower? And how, or not light tower, I always want to call them that because that's what I used to sell, but speed camera thing. And also, how much do they run-ish?
So the one that we had there was 3 providers of it that we got estimates from. And the goal for me was to have, obviously, a speed trailer. But the village would be nice to have a message board also, like community events, construction, like you go on, we don't have one. You see them all the time. If it's KDOT, if it's the state, if it's a village, it says, construction here, whatever it may be. So this vendor, he was out of Elburn, came out, brought a model that was not only the speed trailer, was a message board, camera enabled. It has a camera mounted, so if someone tries to manipulate or mess with it, it sets off an alert, does all the data. It was $19,000 for it. So if we could get the ComEd grant and then also still possibly have a discussion with the highway department, because they would have a use for it too. The last one we had, they did put in a portion of it. It was obviously a lot cheaper of a trailer, but I think we could get down to owing very little on one. And I think this grant closes maybe beginning of March. I would have to look, and they're pretty quick to give out the awards on it.
Okay, any more discussion or questions? Okay, moving to 5B, I'm going to pull that from the agenda. We don't have our finance director here tonight, so we'll pick that back up at our next meeting. We'll go to action items. 6A, motion to approve ordinance 25-07, amending the Campton Hills Village Code regarding the impoundment of vehicles.
I can speak briefly on this.
Okay.
Chief Levan and I discussed how the, oh, yeah, you could make.
So moved, Muncy.
Yep.
Okay, moved by Muncy, second by Williams.
The Chief Levan and I discussed how the impoundment program was going so far since it was established a few months back. And one of the things that he wanted to add was to allow for impoundment for expired registration for a vehicle. That's what it was, right? I'm sorry. Suspended or revoked, not just expired. And so we, confirmed that is something that we'd have the ability to do. This ordinance is just adding it to the list of reasons why a vehicle can be impounded. There are some types of violations that, although the statute allows you to impound for, we typically don't recommend, because sometimes somebody might not have proof of whatever their coverage is at that very time, although they're required to by law, but they might, bring it in a few minutes later. We don't want the vehicle to be impounded because of that simple error. This is one of those that it's very clear. Officer can confirm with the Secretary of State that registration has been revoked or suspended, which is typically because of prior traffic violations that have resulted in guilty findings. So, if anyone has any questions, just let
Okay,
me
go ahead, Chief.
And just to add one thing for us, as Attorney Forte said, like, people get their registration suspended all the time. A lot of times, they don't even know it. It could be for tolls, it could be for red light camera violations. There's a bunch of different reasons, like, we do not tow vehicles for that. That's not the purpose of it. But if we have a vehicle that's on the roadway that has suspended, revoked registration, they have previous charges for that, and then we ask them to provide us insurance, and they don't have insurance again, they shouldn't be driving their car on the road. They've made a pattern of it. They're gonna drive down the road, they're gonna hit a family, they're gonna cause serious injury, they're gonna cause death, and then that family is now stuck footing the bill on it because someone didn't have insurance on their car. So it is for extreme cases that we do use it, and again, we get a lot of suspended registrations. We don't tow cars for that. There has to be other mitigating factors that go into it if we would use it for that reason.
Okay, go ahead, Janet.
All makes complete sense to me. However, we're passing an ordinance, modification ordinance amendment, and it leaves open the possibility that the language that just includes suspended and revoked registrations might be rather broad, given that, as you pointed out, there are people who have suspended registrations. Granted, they shouldn't, but not, they're not intending to do wrong, and they're not the people that you would target. Is there a way to shade this in the ordinance so that it can be clear who your targets are, and that it isn't, not that you would do it, but that it isn't, by the language of the ordinance, possibly targeting other residents in the village that are not who you're after?
So I will say that the ordinance that is currently in place gives discretion to the chief on any impoundment. This particular section of the Illinois Vehicle Code, it's a Class A misdemeanor unless there are lesser included offenses. Not lesser included, but the reason for the suspension is the suspension, the violation of this 3702 section of the IVC is a Class A misdemeanor unless it's for what's considered it's like a business offense. And those lower level offenses are non-insurance, which causes a suspension, or failure to purchase a vehicle tax sticker pursuant to another section of the code. So when the officer runs the registration and sees that it's suspended, they can tell the reason why it's being suspended. There's a signification through the Secretary of State that they can rapidly get that response. If it's one of these lesser included offenses, obviously it would have to be cleared by the chief, but that's his discretion, and I would say that he more likely would not authorize an impoundment for a lesser included offense.
Thank you.
And we actually did have a lady in just a couple hours ago. Her vehicle was towed yesterday. She had suspended registration. She had no valid insurance. It all met the criteria to tow, and we did. She came in today, and she explained to me her current financial situation and the challenges she faced. She provided insurance that she got. She corrected it with the DMV. So, I have the ability to lower that, or I have the ability to get rid of it. And we took care of it for her, and she was happy when she left. So, and the officers know, they have been directed, this is not for the people that just happen to have a suspended registration. They have to meet other criteria in order for it to happen.
I didn't think so. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any more discussion or questions? Go ahead.
Just a question. Thanks, President
Go ahead.
Wojnicki. The fact that under 7-72B, violations or offenses 1 through 14 are not included, 15 is, which I assume was an addition. As we're passing an ordinance, is that okay, just as an update, or should they all have been included?
The use of that ellipsis there is to not require the rest of the text to be on there, so just common drafting term. But yeah, nothing else has changed in the ordinance. Anything that's underlined is being added, so. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. Roll call?
Trustee Muncy,
Aye.
Trustee Williams,
Aye.
Trustee Boatner,
Aye.
Trustee Burson,
Aye.
Trustee McKelvey.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Move on to 6B, motion to approve homeowner reimbursement regarding Long Shadow Lane stormwater repair.
So moved, Muncy.
Moved by
Second.
Muncy, second by Janet. Go ahead, Ed.
Administrator Runer might have something to say. I was just
gonna
asking a
say,
question about the
This
total.
is the total cost that they're asking for reimbursement for. The program was designed, you know, for 50% of their
50.
cost or up to, you know, the $10,000. I need to know whether the consensus of the board is to pay the entire of this invoice or stick with the 50%. It is under your up to limit, so you kind of do need to designate the full invoice or 50% of the invoice.
And what's the full invoice then?
I'm sorry, it's 2250.
2250. 2250 is the full invoice.
Well, that was my first question.
They did do other work, but that was their own manual labor and et
Mhm.
cetera that they're not asking, because they don't have a way to invoice the community,
Understood, but
Sweat.
they paid this full invoice. Because
They did.
Their notes in there make it sound like maybe they didn't have that all done, but they did have that all done.
they did the whole,
Okay.
that's all. Yep. I spoke with Mr. Dillon, and it's functioning.
Go ahead, Nick.
So the way the ordinance or the program is written, that it's 50% of the cost to repair up to 10,000, so it would be 50% of this bill.
Yes.
Good, just want to make sure. I thought you were asking a question.
I think that you could pay the entire amount because it's under the 10,000, but I think the intent always, as you're saying, was to hit 50% of what their costs were. You have a little latitude if you wanted to.
Go ahead, Janet.
I agree that the intent was 50%, and well, I think we might have envisioned that 50% would perhaps be more than this $2,200. I think it's important to stick with the program as it was envisioned. I would not want to create a precedent that might cause other projects in the future to exceed the guidelines.
Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. I would agree with Trustee Burson. This is the one year we had one project. What happens when the year we have 10 projects?
Exactly.
So, yeah, we'd like to keep it as written. That was the reimbursement plan, was to help, not to fully fund. So at 50%, I'd approve of that.
I agree with both of you on that. Any other discussion?
If that's the case, then I can just put it on as a warrant payment of 1,120 next meeting, so.
Okay. Roll call, and that reimbursement will be 1,125, right?
Yeah, it'd be 50% of the invoice.
Okay.
Trustee Muncy,
Aye.
Trustee Burson,
Aye.
Trustee Boatner,
Aye.
Trustee McKelvey.
Aye.
Trustee Williams.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. All right, discussion items. We have 7A, grant application and management policy. I don't know who's taken that.
Actually, it's trustee Boatner has provided this outline and is a means to just start the discussion at the board level and seek, you know, some consensus, if we can get it tonight, to, you know, move this idea forward to make it more robust. And I defer to trustee Boatner to.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I do think that's the next move, and hopefully that's where it would go after this meeting, would be for, you know, the attorney to review everything and create kind of a rock-solid document. But the idea is that in any organization, government, business, anywhere, you really need processes in place, especially when there's, you know, this much money as well as liabilities on the table. It's really, I tried to create kind of the least bureaucratic process. I sent this out over the last week, put some notes on the last page of different feedback that I got from everybody, consolidated it. There were a few questions that I still had that I'll just bring to the table now if we want to knock these out. But in this, there was a threshold at which point a grant would have to go to the board for review, and that was a dollar amount threshold. If that's to be left in there, then we do need to determine what that dollar amount would be. So if there's any other questions that I can answer, it's pretty black and white and straightforward, but thank you.
In a lot of municipalities that I've worked in, it's been 20,000 above, but your spending thresholds are lower here, so it'd probably be more appropriate to do 10,000, and then we would bring it for the board to approve. Because the last thing you want to do is have us apply for something and get 10,000, but the total project's 50, and by taking the 10 in your application, you've already committed to the back balance. And so we'd want to be very careful about that aspect of grants.
Yeah, I've got Jim first. and
Yeah,
then
just a
Ed, and then
comment.
Jana.
I have no issue with this. I think it's pretty straightforward. You're trying to put words to a process to kind of put it in concrete here, and I'm good to go. I guess we can agree on the dollar amount, and then I think we could almost put it on next meeting. I have no issue with it.
Okay, Ed, go ahead.
Thank you, President Winnicke. The question I have is about the grant matching funds. So the example we heard tonight for the ComEd speed trailer, I'd like to use that because it required expediency. We found out about it, and with very little time to respond. There wasn't enough time to ask the board if we had a $10,000 requirement, for example. But if they apply for it and they get it, and we say, nah, we won't get any money from anybody else. I don't want to spend the 10 grand or the 15 grand. We just don't accept the grant, right? You don't have to accept the grant money at that point. It's not like you're beholden to accept it. You just say, no, I'm sorry, we can't live up to our side, so no thanks.
But there will be times when there's larger grants that when you, in your application, if it's federal money, they make you say that what means even that you're going to use for your cost share. Like many times, like on Danker and the roads that we applied and got the 80-20 split, we had to prove up front in the application that we had the funding to fund our 20%. So there will be times where once we say yes, you are committing those other funds for the balance of your owed. And we'll have to be, as a staff, very clear on those items, and that's why I think the 10,000 threshold is good. And it's just most grant money, there is a long window, so we won't have this short window that often. But it'd be good to just have a floor and a ceiling so the staff knows what they can and can't apply to.
Hold on, Nick, Janet's next.
Without the board.
Yeah.
I'm less concerned about the size of the grant and more concerned about the size of the match. In the case of the speed trailer, the match is implicit. It wasn't required by the grant. The grant was for $10,000, and you can spend 11 or 19 or 29, right? And so it's not the size of the grant. It's more the match that the village would be obligated to pay. And in the case of something like the road grants that we're talking about, this is a process. I mean, it's not an event. It's a process in which there's a pre-engineering and there's additional engineering. And so by the time we got to the point that we were committed to spend a significant amount of money on that process, it had come before the board multiple times, so it wasn't an accident. There's lots of different kinds of grants that are available, and Trustee Boatner has done a great job of bringing some of them to our attention. I recall knocking on doors a couple of years ago, and there was somebody in a neighborhood a bit to the west of me who claimed that the whole neighborhood was experiencing significant stormwater flooding. I didn't really know, it wasn't my neighborhood. She was very earnest about it, and indicated that she had experience as a grant writer, and that she was more than willing to assist in writing grant applications to try and alleviate the problem, and that she had brought it to the village and had been turned down. And said that, no, you shouldn't do that, we're not on board with that. And so what I would really like to see in the process that we're trying to develop, and I think I'm seeing it there, is that someone could come to us with something like this and try and advance that. They could even do some of the groundwork for us, right? And they could say, hey, I found this grant. It's $50,000. And it doesn't necessarily obligate us to anything, but it's an opportunity for us. And so I wouldn't want someone like that, who is really trying to do a good thing for us, to be dissuaded based on whether it was 10 or 30 or 50 or however much it was, as long as they weren't obligating the village in some way as they pursued that, and trying to coordinate with the village through a process like this, I think is one of the ways we can make sure that doesn't happen.
And I think if we all could, Nick probably is gonna say, why don't you just go to the 6th, 7th page down where you get your key considerations about matching funds and not able to obligate the village without a village board approval of something that Trustee Burson just outlined. It's in the document, and it's explicitly spelled out that if there's other obligations and legal review will be presented before staff will be required to come to the board with a resolution at minimum to obligate the village to go forward with an active application that has future obligations are 10 or 20%. And it is kind of spelled out, and then creating it by ordinance, the lawyer will review that and make sure it's written into the ordinance. So that is the one danger that I think Nick pointed out, and you've outlined very clearly. We'll make sure we'll put in the ordinance for your acceptance at the future meeting if this goes forward.
Nick, go ahead.
I'm just going to respond to you, Janet. So the dollar amounts that are in here, they're not referring to grant size, but it was the match or the contribution size, the village's end of the grant. And to kind of follow up on the rest of what you had said, I think that we're really on the same page with, volunteers, people on committees and commissions. Having a framework like this really takes the confusion out. It's kind of like a grant. Oh, man, I'd love to do a grant, but I don't know where to begin. Like, how does a village work with grants? There's nothing right now on paper. So now someone can refer to this and say, this is what I do. Okay, this is how we deal with grants. And then it also protects us to make sure people, are following the rules and everything's documented and consistent.
Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. Yeah, to that same point, I mean, I agree, the matching funds is the threshold, not the grant amount. But then also, I don't see anything in here, I think you've done a great job putting this together, Trustee Boatner. I don't see anything in here that would dissuade a volunteer. It just makes it clear that a volunteer is not leading the process, that the village will oversee the process. But volunteers certainly could do, bulk of the heavy lifting if they wanted to, as long as the village agreed to it. So I think it's a good program as it is. If we had to pick a number, of and again, I guess the wording is, for me, a required match, or something to that degree, that would require us to match $10,000 or above, would make sense to me. As I heard the ComEd grant for the speed trailer, that's not requiring us to match anything. If we found one for $12,000 and we got a $10,000 grant, great. If we found one for $50,000, we're not required. So if it's a required match, I would say 10,000 would be a comfortable level for me.
And that's under the spending authority too.
Right,
so.
and just to point out, with a lot of, if it's a very significant grant, especially a lot of, we, like you've seen before, for like road improvements, the village is required to pass an ordinance indicating the village's ability to pay for its match And not just that, I mean, the entities that are providing the money to the village won't give the money without the ordinance. So that's an extra step that you would be required, in some cases even to apply for, or then to accept the grant, even after it's been applied for. So,
Almost every federal program has that ordinance requirement.
Tom, did you?
Yeah, I agree with everything. Thanks, Nick, for doing this, by the way. This is really good. I know you've been like, this is a big thing for you, and you really pushed it ahead, so I'm happy about this thing that you came up with. I think it's wonderful. I like the idea, if money's falling from the sky, let's get a big net out and grab it, especially in a village where, I mean, that means a lot. It's not like we're Schaumburg or another bigger village. So I think that would be good. But I hate to have anything that would keep us from getting it, like we have to wait for a meeting. Let's say we were in the summer where we have one meeting per month, and then you're like, wow, I got this grant. You know what I mean? I just like to see it go through as much as I can. So however we can do that, if it's the way Ed wants to word it, where it wouldn't obligate us, would be great. But I love what you put together. Thanks.
I would just quickly reply to that if I can. I didn't want to make this too complicated, but I had considered, what if things, it's last minute, I've heard the chief mention that he found out about a grant opportunity and needed to get an application in. I created the fast track grant approval process which I could pass around. We don't want to miss opportunities, and a couple people have mentioned that, and this does not address that. So in the summertime, one meeting a month, and this is something that I could do the same thing I did last time and send it to everybody, and potentially we could still move it on to an action item for next week. This will still be on the agenda, it'll be public.
And don't forget, even that one meeting or in-between meetings that, don't fall properly, we can always call a special meeting and just need, 4 people to be able to make it and do one item on the agenda that grant. So we'll always be able to make the threshold
Yeah.
timeline, pretty much.
Okay, thank you.
So our attorney Carmen said he'd put a policy together, and then,
We
what,
can
for the
prepare it.
next meeting? Yeah, we'll prepare it.
So the direction is to prepare an ordinance that would
Mhm.
adopt this policy. And it was the
Good.
consensus for the 10 grand?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll work on that.
Okay, good. Okay, move on. 7B, engineer RFQ response.
Yes, we had 5 responses, and then the next step, there was a, kind of a inclusion of the Public Works Subcommittee to review, and I sent them to all the trustees for any input as well, and we selected 2 for interview, H.R. Green and Engineering Resources out of Warrenville, and Mike Millette and I and Tom interviewed them a week ago, Wednesday, and I think it was the consensus of the 3 of us that H.R. Green did the better job and had the more robust back office for support going forward, and that'd be our recommendation. And Tom, if you want, Mike wanted to be available by technology, but his flight got changed today, and he's in air, so he can't join you. But if you moved it forward with H.R. Green, Mike would be here next meeting to expand on why he thought that was the best course of action. But Tom, if you want, and Kim, you're from this.
And Mike is, the resident expert on this because he deals with this in his whole career. But I got to say, both candidates that the Public Works sent to us were fantastic. And I really like Engineering Resource Associates, very good company. H.R. Green, obviously, we've been dealing with them. I think the consensus was they would both do a great job, but I feel like H.R. Green at least has a, when it comes to the township, is familiar with them. We are familiar with them. That's one of the things. And also, too, Engineering Resource Associates were, they didn't do a lot in Kane County. They did things for Kane County, but they didn't do a lot of villages out here. So I just thought H.R. Green was a better choice. Me and Mike talked about it, went through it. We asked them a ton of questions. They were both very professional. The It was really good. So I'll just leave it at that. Kim, if you want to kind of stand up and talk a little bit, because you guys are the ones that sent us those, so.
Sure. Come on up, Kim.
And
Okay.
Kim, you're speaking for John and the subcommittee of the Public Works.
Yes, I'm talking for the chair of the Public Works Committee tonight, so different hat tonight. He apologizes for not being here, but he had a death in the family, so he couldn't be here. So I got the authorization to just go over what the Public Works consensus was, and we, of course, sent you HR Green and, is it EMI or something like that? With our preferred engineer being HR Green. We felt compelled, not only do they have our history, they know our history. Can't speak enough about the grants they've gotten us. There's no way we'd be doing 4 roads this year without HR Green. Just wouldn't be happening. So we're confident in what they've been doing, and of course, we didn't want to split and cut it off midstream with these projects happening here, starting in the spring. So that was pretty much it. Our entire committee had that consensus. There wasn't a single nay, but we were compelled. We did go over all 5 applicants. We did talk about it at a meeting. So it wasn't like we just said, no, sorry, it's HR Green or nobody. So, but we do feel that HR Green is the correct choice to stay with. I don't know if there's any questions for the Public Works Committee or.
Thank you, Kim. You want any questions? Go ahead, Nick. Or
General question, comment? So through the process of these interviews, of course, we're kind of shopping around and, you know, we're trying to get the best quality, the best value. You know, we've got a great history with HR Green, but like any shopper, any consumer, you know, we're looking for the best value and the best quality. So with these engineering firms, they put the burden of their overhead into their labor, and they use a multiplier, and for all their labor, it's attached with a multiplier. And those vary from village to village. You know, HR Green may have a 3.8 multiplier here and 3.4 somewhere else. And I was curious if you could kind of fill the board in on anybody, that conversation of the value part as far as the actual dollars and cents. Like,
And-
what conversations
and
came up?
There,
and how
the
did those go?
multiplier in a bigger firm like C-Bell and HR Green, for instance, they have a different multiplier for different types of engineering work. If it's stormwater, it's one, and if it's the road MFT program, it's a different. So it's not a set multiplier for every type of project. And I think in engineering resources alluded to that as well. But generally speaking, just like law firms and engineering firms, you're supposed to do the bid on quality and not pure price. So that multiplier is something that we could negotiate with HR Green on every award if we wanted to. Their latitude to doing it might be pretty limited by their home office, but, you know, it is one of those things that they do have a different multiplier oftentimes for different project work. Like if they're gonna, Baxter Woodman on their roads would do one, but if they're redoing your water sewer treatment plant, they have a different one, because it's, you know, the different scope of number of engineers in the back office too. And the complication of the bids are much bigger on something like water plants or sewer plants than a straight road project. And Scott could probably opine on that a little better if you wanted to explain that.
Yeah.
If you want to go into a lot more detail, I think Scott would be better to stand
And
up
we
and
don't,
touch it.
I don't mean to, we don't need to do that.
No, but it
I
is-
just
it's a
wanted to
key
hear
element.
if there
It
was
is a-
some
yeah.
conversation of cost.
Right. I'll cover that briefly. Actually, consultants' multiplier rates are audited by the state. So that covers overhead, et cetera, that is built into it, that is a state-approved multiplier. Different consultants do have different rates, and as mentioned, depending on the particular project. There's a difference in rates. They're reasonably comparable across the market. You're
But-
buying experience, is what you're buying.
But IDOT and MFT projects is pretty standard, isn't it?
Correct. And like I say, they are audited by the state, so.
Okay, any questions for Scott while he's up there? Any others? Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, we ready to move on, or?
No, I think. We need to do a motion to move
Well,
the
it's-
selection of HR
it's-
Green
it's-
to the action item of next month, if there's consensus to do that.
It's a consensus then, yeah, all right. All in, consensus, we'll go around. Ed, Nick, Jim? Janet and Tom? Okay, good.
And Mike would be a yes, he said to say yes.
Yeah, Mike, okay. Great. All right, we'll move on to additional items from the president, trustees, or attorney. Anybody have anything to add? Go ahead, James.
Yeah, sorry, real quick,
Yeah.
I forgot like my main point earlier in my report. All you guys have in front of you the 2024 annual report. I'm not sure why I forgot about it. Clerk Johnson has it too, and I think it's already been posted online, so it's up for the public. Huge thanks to Christina. That is not my
She
work.
did a great job.
So that is her work,
Yeah.
so she did a real good job. Just remember, when you're looking at there, she's got little notes for you on it, even with the budget part of it. That's a 2024 report, but we're still in a budget year, so if you look at dollars and you're like, well, why is it missing a little bit here? It's because our budget year isn't complete. But she did a good job noting it, so it should be
She
pretty
did a great job.
self-explanatory, so
Yeah.
thank you.
All right, and then I just had one thing. At our next meeting, Carmen is going to put together a resolution. I received an email, and I think, Mark, you got it too, from Jerry Johnson over at Garfield Farm. He's interested in historically registering Echo Valley, which is on Beath Road, not too far from Town Hall Road. And so, as a letter of support, we want to put together a resolution and strongly recommend that that move forward. And then I'll just do a letter on my own too, saying that it's a beautiful idea.
And,
So,
and that would be about
yeah.
the seventh or eighth property in Campton Hills that the county, it's the Kane County recognition.
Exactly, it's Kane County, yeah,
Right. The-
recognition.
The village has an IGA with the county that the county, upon a referral from the village, then reviews the historic landmark applications through their commission and county board. So the village is just signing off on the application essentially. They take it over.
Yeah. All right, moving on to 9, I'd like to have a motion to go into closed session. Moved
So
by
moved.
McKelvey, second by Muncy. It is for, I know you. Well, it's following matters of appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees or contractors or personnel. Yeah, and we'll have no information afterwards, so you really don't have to stay. So, and thank you for being here.
No action.
Yeah, no action. Mhm. Are we going to stay in this room?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Trustee Muncy? Aye. I'm sorry, trustee McAlvey?
Aye.
Trustee Boatner?
Aye. He says aye.
Trustee Burson?
Here.
Trustee Williams?
Aye.
And President.
President Warnick? I don't think I have to vote to go in.
President present.
Yeah. We'll do the president one after. We don't have to do that after because we're not coming back.